We are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share this video so you can help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That'll be at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. So I apologize right off the bat for this coming a little bit later than usual. I've just kind of been battling some headaches, some migraines. Just haven't felt particularly great the last couple of days, so I decided to just do the smart thing, get some rest, get some sleep, and it certainly has worked. I feel a heck of a lot better today, so hopefully this podcast will be as energetic and positive and meaningful as usual for all of you guys. And I have a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's jump right into it. Mac Jones. At the beginning of the season, I was really high on Mac Jones, and in a lot of ways, I guess I still am, but right now, where I stand on Mac Jones is I am not so sure that he is the guy for the Patriots long term. And I know that seems really, really harsh, and I also know that, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how Mac Jones, he needed more help. He's a good quarterback, whatever the case may be. I'm very flustered with Mac Jones right now. And I don't really know what I'm going to get out of him on a regular basis other than just not good enough. And that's what it has been all season long. And quite frankly, it's been not good enough for the entire Patriots offense. And we'll get into that in a minute. But for me, Mac Jones just has not proven anything to me, really. The big story was made in the offseason that he's gotten a lot more muscular and his arm strength is there and he's improved in terms of, being able to throw the deep ball and obviously, first year to second year, he's got a full year in the offense now and he's going to be ready to go. And he honestly looks worse. A lot worse than last year. Not really sure why that is. I do know that offensive line play has severely declined from last year. That's certainly a problem. And also, again, big stories coming out of Patriots camp is we don't really know who the offensive coordinator is. Is it Matt Patricia? Is it Joe Judge? Right now, it seems more like Matt Patricia is the offensive play caller, which I'm not so sure is great long-term for Mac Jones. But for me, the proof is in the pudding, and I want to go over some Mac Jones statistics right now for you. 68.2% completion percentage. That's pretty good, obviously. That's not, that's not anything to sneeze at. That's not anything to say that's bad, because that's actually pretty good. But quite frankly, when most of your passes are, 10 or less yards from the line of scrimmage, I would hope you'd be able to complete 65 to 70% of your passes as an NFL quarterback as well. So for me, that's not super impressive. 2,198 yards. Guys, we're 13 weeks in, 14 weeks in now. I'm recording this on Friday, December 16th. So in just a couple of days, we'll be in week 15. And Mac Jones just, he hasn't, that's just not good enough. Now, I know he missed a couple of games, obviously, right, with, Bailey Zappi taking over for a week or two there, but even then, 2,500 yards, even if he was at 2,500 yards or 2,600 yards, that's just not all that great for this point in the season. That's not going to do it. Right now, obviously, with the games he's played 12 games, I believe, at this point. Actually, maybe 11 games at this point. So, you're averaging not even 200 yards a game. And, even if he was a little bit above that, if he had played, the entire season, obviously, without missing those couple of games, if you're averaging 210 yards a game, that's just not good enough in today's NFL. You've got guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Obviously, still Aaron Rodgers, though the Packers are having a pretty bad year. You got all these quarterbacks that are just slinging it. Joe Burrow, guys like that are slinging it. Justin Herbert. I could go on and on and on. But the point is, Mac Jones, if you're going to average 200 yards a game, then, that to me in the NFL, that's just not good enough unless you're you're running the ball for 200 yards a game as well, which the Patriots are not doing. Spoiler. So, again, that's not good enough for me, the yards. 7 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Never a good thing when you're throwing more picks than touchdowns. Never, 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 never. That has never once been a positive thing for a quarterback. Now, I know Jameis Winston, a few years back had the dubious honor of being the first quarterback ever to have 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in a season. Which, I mean, that's really impressive, quite frankly. But hey, guess what? At least he threw for 30 touchdowns. I mean, that's still, 180 points that the guy was caused with his arm directly. But Mac Jones, 7 touchdowns in 11 games. 7 touchdowns in 11 games, guys. That's atrocious. That's atrocious. I made fun of Zach Wilson for the amount of touchdowns he had coming into a couple of weeks ago. And Mac Jones, quite frankly, has been just as bad in that area. I mean, he really has. Maybe not quite as bad, but pretty much he's been horrible. I mean, he's been absolutely horrible. The Patriots' red zone struggles have been just absolutely incredible throughout the season. They've just been horrible in that area. And a lot of it is because I think teams know, 1, the quarterback doesn't have a strong enough arm to fit it into tight windows. 2, the Patriots don't have enough weapons in the red zone to consistently get open to be a threat. And 3, the only guys that are really going to score in the red zone for the Patriots are your running backs. So you just defend the run game in the red zone and you're fine. I mean, you're pretty much all good there. Now, obviously the Patriots right now are still above 500, and unless things changed on Thursday, which I'm not sure they did, the Patriots are still the final seed in the playoffs, which is just crazy because that means every team in the AFC other than the Jets right now is going to be in the playoffs. But obviously the Jets are tied for the same record as the Patriots, so they could easily get in as well. Point being, the Patriots haven't been playing horribly. They've been carried by their defense again this year. But when your quarterback is throwing more touchdowns and interceptions and you're 11 weeks in and you've thrown less than 1 touchdown a game, almost half of a touchdown a game, quite frankly, that's just not going to get it done. I mean, what do you expect to happen in the postseason? Are you going to beat a team 13-3 in the postseason with the way the AFC is going? Are you going to beat the Bills that way? The Dolphins that way? The Bengals that way? The Chiefs that way? No. You're going to have to put up 35, 40 points to have a chance. Look at the Chiefs and Bills divisional playoff game. Not even the AFC Championship game. The second round of the playoffs. Both teams had 40-plus points by the end of the game. And one of those teams that put up 40-plus points lost. Because that's how the AFC is. You have to be able to put up points. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a low-scoring game if you play in the AFC. Of course you can. But to just rely on that, it's not feasible long-term. It just isn't. Today in the NFL, it is completely different than it was in the mid-2000s when the Patriots could rely on their defense to only keep that team to 14, 20 points a game. You could rely on that back then, but in today's game, there's just too many weapons, too many great quarterbacks, especially in the AFC right now. I mean, again, defense, while it is vital to your team's success, of course, offense is what runs the game now. As much as I don't like it as a fan, I am one of the weird guys that loves defensive games. I'm one of those guys that, 2 years in a row, right? The Patriots were in the Super Bowl a few years back. They played the Eagles. Tom Brady threw for 500-plus yards. Nick Foles threw for 500 yards. It was just ridiculous. It was just a complete shootout. There was no defense played whatsoever. I was bored. Because it's like, well, there's no suspense. To me, there's no suspense when it's just offense. It's just, you're just slinging the balls all over the place, right? And for me, that's not exciting. Now, it's fun, I guess, in terms of that guy scored, and then the fans go nuts. That's cool. But for me, it's not a suspenseful, interesting football game if both teams are just going back and forth and there's no defense whatsoever. I much prefer defensive games. And luckily for me, the next year, the whole universe said that the Patriots-Rams Super Bowl was boring. I was having a great time. And the reason for that is in those kinds of games, one touchdown, one can mean that your team wins. Could just turn the whole game upside down. It could mean the death in your or the nail in your coffin and death to you, or it could mean you're going to definitely win the Super Bowl in those moments. To me, that's suspenseful. When every single possession you are hanging in the balance and something needs to give. If you score a touchdown, you're probably going to win the game. To me, that is exciting. Now, it's not like that for every sport, right? I can't stand basketball games that are like, 88 to 85, or baseball games that end in 1-0. Like, that's boring, right? But for me, there's something about a defensive football game that I just love. So, again, unpopular opinion, I'm well aware, but let me love football the way I love it, right? So for me, as vital as defense is right now, I just don't think you can rely on that every night when you're going to play, especially in the playoffs. I just listed the cavalcade of teams that you're going to have to face if you make the playoffs, right? You're probably going to have to face a combination, or at least one of these teams, right? You're going to have to face the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Chargers. You're going to have to face one of these teams in order to advance if you're the last seed in the playoffs. Whoever's going to be the first seed, my guess is it's probably going to be the Chiefs. And if you're going to face the Chiefs, you really think you're going to stop that offense and they're only going to score 2 touchdowns? No, it's not going to happen. Not with that offense. No, there's no way. Or at least if it happened, I would be floored if that happened. So I can't rely on that. You have to, in some ways, at least be capable of putting up 35 points in a game with your quarterback, and not just by your defense getting turnovers or you winning the field position battle. And all that's important, absolutely. But you still your offense has to be able to stand on its own and be successful in the playoffs. It just has to. And right now, I just don't see that. Some more stats for you. Mac Jones has a quarterback rating, a QBR, of 33.8. That is 28th in the NFL. That's obviously not great considering there are 32 starting quarterbacks. So, for me, that just ain't going to cut it. Again, when you're bottom 5 in the NFL in quarterback rating and your team is above 500, first of all, that just shows you how incredible the defense has been. But second of all, imagine what your team could be if you actually had good, fun quarterback play. Just imagine. 85.7 passer rating. All right? Now, for those of you who don't really, know what passer rating is in terms of like the rankings and everything and kind of, what the numbers mean, because I'm kind of in that boat. Like when I just see a number, if somebody says, this guy has a 91 passer rating, I'm like, that's probably pretty good, but I don't know for sure. So I looked it up. As of right now, in the company of what I deem to be starting caliber quarterbacks, or at least this year, right, that guys have played enough to really have a great sample size as to what kind of a year they're going to have, Mac Jones ranks, once again, 28th in the NFL in passer rating among starting quarterbacks. The only guys that he is in front of right now are Russell Wilson, who has had a historically bad season, especially for him. Justin Fields, whose team is basically made up of a bunch of cardboard boxes that don't know how to play. Matt Ryan, whose offensive line is made up of a bunch of cardboard boxes that don't know how to play. And Quentin Nelson, who is still amazing, but everybody else is a cardboard box right now. And Davis Mills, who is playing for the 1-win Houston Texans. So, and you know what? If you wanted to throw Kenny Pickett in there, let's say Mac Jones is 27th. Kenny Pickett has had a horrible year, but he's also been in and out of the lineup. He's also been injured, and he's also a rookie, and the Steelers are terrible. So I don't even feel like it's fair to include Kenny Pickett in this because he'd be by far the worst quarterback that has played starter-type minutes. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm more comfortable saying 28th. But if you want to say 27th, just to be fair, I guess, fine. He's the 5th worst quarterback in the NFL. Great, in terms of starters. So you look at these stats, and it just paints a picture, of just mediocrity. And quite frankly, not even mediocrity of just poor play, not even mediocre play, just really, really bad football. And that's what Mac Jones has been playing this year. Now, there's been times where he's looked good. He threw for a lot of yards and a couple of touchdowns against the Vikings. That's nice. And unfortunately, that was the one time his defense didn't really have a great day. So you could kind of say Mac Jones played well that day. But all the other games, basically, that he's been a part of this year, he hasn't played very well. So every week, instead of me looking forward to watching the Patriots, I find myself wishing that they were on defense more than they were on offense. And anybody who's watched football for a number of years knows, chances are you're not going to score any points on defense. So when you're rooting for your defense to be on the field, when barring, a fumble that gets returned for a touchdown like Raekwon McMillan had last week, or a pick six like Jack Jones has had a couple of those this year, barring that circumstance, you're not, the much greater likelihood when your team is on defense is you're going to give up points. You're going to have less of a chance to win the game when your team is on defense. But for the Patriots, it seems like their best chance of scoring on a week-to-week basis is if their defense scores. Because their offense just can't do anything. And even when they do move the ball, they can't get in the end zone. They don't score because no one can get open. Mac Jones doesn't have that crazy arm to be able to throw it into double coverage or throw it past linebackers in the red zone. When your defense is crunched up like that and you don't have to worry about, spreading out your defense, you can really be in a confined space. There's not a lot of room to fit the football. You have to be able to create plays outside the pocket and get the defense scrambling, or you have to be able to fit the ball in the tight windows sometimes. Mac Jones does neither. He does neither. Now, you could say what you want about Tom Brady and his lack of mobility, but he had plenty of arm strength to fit it into tight spaces. And plus, I guess having Gronk for a number of years helped as well. But the point is, Mac just doesn't seem to have those skills right now. I'm not saying he can't develop into that, but I just don't see it right now. I mean, can any of us that have watched football and that understand who Mac Jones is and that have watched the Patriots over the last handful of years, 2 years, obviously, with Mac Jones, can any of us really see Mac Jones turning into somebody who could just bomb the ball 70 yards down the field? I don't think so. I really just don't think so. Now, again, you can say what you want about Tom Brady, but he could throw the ball deep. He could. Look at when he had Randy Moss in 2007. He was throwing deep all the time. Accurately. Efficiently. Deadly. That's why he broke the touchdown record at the time. Because you gave Tom Brady an actual deep weapon for once, and he showed you that he could do it. Mac Jones, you've given him some deep weapons. You've given him a guy like Devontae Parker and Nelson Aguilar, guys that are supposed to be speedsters that can burn, and quite frankly, I don't think he could give him the ball if he wanted to. I really don't. I don't think that Mac Jones could get the ball there consistently, even if he wanted to. Even if those guys were getting open more often. I just don't see it. He's flashed some great plays, and he's still very young. He's a first-round pick for a reason. I'm not giving up on Mac Jones. I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying that I'm just done with Mac Jones. They should trade him or release him. No. But right now, I'm starting to get worried. And I am not 100% certain that Mac Jones is the guy right now for the Patriots long term. All right, I want to move on to the Atlanta Braves. Now, why do I want to talk about the Atlanta Braves? Well, the Atlanta Braves, they made a pretty sizably big trade over the last couple of days with the Brewers and the Athletics. They traded for Sean Murphy, a former all-star catcher from the Athletics. And they gave up a haul for Sean Murphy. And I want to kind of go over the details of the trade for you right here. So in this trade, the Braves got one player, and that was, of course, Sean Murphy, the catcher from the Oakland Athletics. And in this trade, the Athletics got Kyle Muller, who is, I believe, the number one prospect in the Braves organization right now, and he certainly is a fantastic pitching prospect. Freddie Tarnok, who I think is also top 10 in their prospect system right now, or in their minor league system, I should say. He's pitched in the majors a couple of times, and he's looked pretty good, so A's getting two really solid pitchers there. They also get Esteury Ruiz from the Brewers. He's an outfielder. He was a top 10 prospect in the Brewers organization. So three really, really nice prospects for the A's. They also get Royber Salinas from the Braves as well. He's another pitcher. And Manny Pena, the veteran catcher, also goes to the Athletics. So 5 players, 4 of them from the Braves, and 2 are pretty fantastic prospects going over there just from the Braves there. And then the Brewers, in this instance, got William Contreras from the Braves, who obviously was an all-star last year at the catcher position and as a designated hitter as well. He was pretty effective. So they get a really, really nice young catcher right there, do the Brewers. And they also get Joel Payamos, a right-handed pitcher, also coming from the Braves, and then Justin Yeager, another pitcher, also coming from the Braves. So the Braves giving up a ton of prospects here and players just to get one Sean Murphy. And some of those players are pretty darn good. Kyle Muller, obviously. Obviously, you have Freddie Tarnok and, of course, William Contreras. So 3 guys that really could have made a big difference in your rotation and in your lineup this year. And you get that, or you give that away, I should say, for Sean Murphy. And here's what I want to say. So a lot of people have been calling this trade terrible. And what's been interesting to me is a lot of people think that it is terrible for the Braves, thinking that they gave up way too much. And other people think that it was terrible for the A's and the Brewers because, I mean, I don't really know why they would say it was terrible for the Brewers. For me, I think the Brewers got an absolute steal of a trade. They gave up the number, I think 6 or 8 or whatever it was, prospect in their system, which is pretty high up there. And in return, they got an all-star young catcher who could also be a designated hitter for you, and 2 pitching prospects. I mean, that's not a horrible haul for just that one prospect. I think the Brewers made out pretty well in this trade. And I think the A's, at this point, I mean, anybody on your team that's of any kind of worth you should be getting rid of, because the A's, at this point, I mean, with the way the MLB is going right now, with the giant contracts being handed out, the A's have no chance. They're not going to be able to compete at this kind of level in terms of finances. So at this point, you're terrible already. You might as well get as many prospects as you can and see if you could put something together a couple years down the road. So I think the A's actually made out pretty well with this trade as well. What I don't understand is the Braves side of it. Now, Sean Murphy is a fantastic player. And I think that right now, he's going to really, really help the Braves in terms of being behind the dish and what he can do defensively, what he can do offensively. I think he's certainly an upgrade over Travis d'Arnaud, and I think he may even be an upgrade from William Contreras as well in terms of just long-term benefit. But here's what I don't get. I don't understand why the Braves felt the need to make this trade. Because for me, I would have just been happy with William Contreras. That's just my opinion. Now, I know a lot of Braves fans will say, well, he's probably just, I think he just long-term, he's a designated hitter. But he's still, 22, 23 years old? He's still so young. He still has time to figure it out behind the plate, figure it out behind the dish, get better defensively. Now, will he ever get better defensively? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But for me, I just think that giving up all these prospects if you're the Braves, especially on the pitching side, I just don't think it was a great idea. Because, mainly, your pitching staff is what is your weakness right now. I think your lineup is set. I think your lineup, even with William Contreras, is pretty set. Your bullpen has been one of the best in baseball over the last 2 to 3 years, if not longer than that. But your rotation has battled injuries, has battled ineffectiveness, has battled guys that have just not made the most of the opportunities. And yes, you have Max Fried, you have Ian Anderson, but after that, it starts to get a little murky. And I think Kyle, I almost said Kyle Fuller, that is a defensive back for the Bears. Kyle Muller, or former defensive back for the Bears. I don't know if he's still for the Bears. He's playing in the NFL. The point is, Kyle Muller, the pitcher, obviously, I think he's a guy that really could have been a weapon for the Braves this year. I mean, again, you have Travis d'Arnaud. You have William Contreras. As a Red Sox fan, I'd kill to have that catcher's room. Our catcher's room stinks. I couldn't even tell you who our catcher is right now. I really couldn't. It was Christian Vasquez, but he's gone. It was Kevin Plawecki, but he's gone. I don't know who our catcher is. I don't know who our catcher's going to be this year. It's probably going to be somebody I've never heard of, or some veteran that is just looking to kind of find a place where he could play every once in a while. I don't know. I'd kill to have the catcher's room of Travis d'Arnaud and William Contreras. A young, up-and-coming stud catcher who's not as good defensively but still can develop. And on the other side, a veteran who's very, very good behind the plate and can deliver some pop at times that is going to, kind of mentor that young kid to eventually take that starting role. Isn't that the ideal scenario for catchers nowadays? Isn't that literally the best case scenario for your team's catching prospects? Having a guy who's been there, done that, won a World Series now, has, had a lot of success mentoring a young guy who's already had a lot of success? Isn't that ideal? Because to me, that's ideal. Now, obviously, I guess the ideal scenario is to have like a JT Realmuto or a Will Smith. I think Will Smith of the Dodgers is probably your most ideal scenario, an all-star catcher at 25 years old. Doesn't really need any mentoring because he's already an absolute stud. Now, maybe that's your ideal scenario, and maybe that's what Sean Murphy gives you. But Sean Murphy is not 24 years old. He's already 28. So he's not going to be that absolute young stud catcher. Now, not to say that he's old, but 28, I think at that point, you're past your prospect days. Unless you've been in the minor leagues since you're 26 or something like that. But for me, your days of developing are numbered if you're 28 years old. I don't, especially at the catcher position, I just don't see a guy at 30 years old just all of a sudden awakening at the catcher position and being great. Now, Travis d'Arnaud kind of did it. He was kind of for most of his career, and then at 28, 29, he had a real nice season with the Rays, and now he's with the Braves, and he's doing well for himself. So I guess it's possible for a catcher to just suddenly develop like crazy. But for me, I think I just would have rather had William Contreras. And it's not even just about William Contreras. You also had Shea Langeliers last year, and you traded him to the Athletics for Matt Olson. Now, obviously, Matt Olson is a fantastic part of your team, and I'm not saying that was a bad trade. But think about it this way. You had a great veteran catcher in Travis d'Arnaud. You had William Contreras, who's a young catcher up and coming in your organization that's MLB ready right now, and last year was an all-star. And then Shea Langeliers, who's another fantastic young catcher prospect, coming up through the ranks right behind Contreras to take d'Arnaud's spot so that Contreras can move up and be the number one catcher, and Langeliers can then develop, and then maybe you pick one of those to be your main guy, and you trade the other one, or you just let them go in free agency, whatever the case may be. Or heck, you could have a crazy two-headed monster at the catcher spot, and the best part is, for the next 2, 3, 4 years, it'd be super-duper cheap. And now both of those guys are gone. And Sean Murphy's a great catcher. I'm not saying he's not great, because he is. And I think he's better than William Contreras right now. But for me, I think that you had it made with your catcher's room. If you're the Braves, you had it made at one point. You literally checked all the boxes. Veteran that's producing still. Guy that's MLB ready, that's now an all-star and ready to take his spot when d'Arnaud leaves. And another young catcher ready to take Contreras' old spot as the backup catcher and possibly designated hitter when d'Arnaud eventually moves on. That's ideal as it gets. It really is. And now the Braves don't have that. They don't have any young catcher prospects coming up through the ranks unless I'm missing somebody, but I don't think I am at this point. You've got Sean Murphy, who's very, very good, and Travis d'Arnaud, who's very, very good. But if d'Arnaud leaves, you don't have anybody to replace him that's, feasible without a free agent signing. And even if you decide to re-sign Travis d'Arnaud, how much more productive behind the plate is he going to be at 33, 34, 35, 36, so on and so forth, than he is now? He's going to take a dip because that's what happens to catchers. You have to transition them to first base or the outfield or designated hitter to have their careers last a long time, unless your name's Yadier Molina, but there's only one of him. There's not going to be another one. Hate to break it to everybody, there's only one Yadier Molina, there'll never be another one. It's very rare for guys to catch into their 40s, especially in today's age. Yadier Molina, maybe Joe Mauer, but even he was DHing and playing first base by the end of his career. I can't really think of many more. So for me, I just think, you had it made. Now, again, I understand getting rid of Langeliers to get Matt Olson. He's, you needed, I'd say you needed to replace Freddie Freeman, but you basically... You got Matt Olson before you lost Freddie Freeman officially, so you essentially told Freddie Freeman to get the hell out of town with that trade. And for me, that catcher's room with those three guys would have just been ideal. But the Braves don't have that now. And so I guess if you're going to do something, you might as well get one of the better catchers in the game and again, great two-headed monster with Murphy and d'Arnaud. I think Murphy's a great player. d'Arnaud's obviously a great player. But me personally, I would have rather had the combination of d'Arnaud, Contreras, and Langeliers on my team than the other way around. And you know what? Even taking Langeliers completely out of the equation because you want Matt Olson, right? Fine. I think I would have rather had Kyle Muller in my rotation this year. Possibly, Tarnok in my rotation this year. And have as I drop the microphone, I will not edit that out, by the way, have the combination of d'Arnaud and Contreras in the, at my backstop. That's just me. That's my opinion. You can take that as you will. But, to me, I just think this trade doesn't make perfect sense if you're the Braves. Now, I want to talk about one of the Braves' division rivals, so one of their teams of direct competition this year, and that is the New York Mets. They have certainly been a busy bunch of bees this offseason, and they have not stopped for 1 second to even smell the roses, ironically because, again, they've been busy bees. But the Mets have spent a ton of money. And I mean a ton. More money than I could even fathom having. That's how much money they've spent this offseason. And I want to take a little bit of a different approach than some other personalities or podcasters or whatever have taken. And I want to kind of talk about whether I think the Mets spending spree is going to be good for baseball. So let me start out with this. I think that the Mets spending this much money is cool. It's fun. I think that baseball players should be paid what they are worth, and I think it is great. I think that more MLB owners should be willing to spend money. I've talked about it on my channel before. How in the world can the Oakland Athletics or the Tampa Bay Rays or the Pittsburgh Pirates or some of these other smaller market teams compete if their owners won't spend the money or if they don't have the money to spend like other owners do? It's very difficult. And I know that certain organizations are very prideful about that. For instance, the Rays, and they have been very successful as well. So I know that some fans wouldn't want them to have the ability to spend, $150 million on a player or $350 million on a player because it wouldn't be, adherent to the kind of team that they are. But I just feel like it would be so much more fun, especially a couple of years ago, if, the Rays had a chance to sign a Justin Verlander or a Garrett Cole or a Max Scherzer or any of these other big contract players that would really solidify the top of their rotation or the heart of their lineup, whatever it is. I just think that it would have been a lot of fun. But I digress. The Mets spending this much money, while it is fun and while it is really, really cool to see players getting paid, I personally think that it is not going to be the best thing for the long-term health of baseball. Because when you've got teams that are just going to wipe the floor with all these big free agents, it's going to be difficult for other teams to get guys that they need or keep guys that they already have or so on and so forth. And it also doesn't guarantee World Series victories. It really doesn't. I mean, you just think about the Yankees and the Dodgers the last handful of seasons have had the two highest payrolls in the league. The Dodgers won the World Series the COVID year in 2020. But other than that, the Yankees and Dodgers haven't won anything with those crazy payrolls. They haven't. Now, how crazy has the Mets spending spree been? Now, I know that we've seen teams have really high payrolls in the past. We've seen teams really just go nuts in terms of, paying luxury tax and all that stuff. But what the Mets have done this year and last year has been completely unprecedented. No baseball team has ever been willing to spend this kind of money, pay this kind of tax, and do what they are doing right now. Let me give you an illustration of how much money the Mets have spent. Every player that I am going to name, until obviously I tell you otherwise, is going to be guys that the Mets have signed this year alone, and how much money their contracts are worth annually. Not total, but annually. Justin Verlander, $43 million. Jose Quintana, $13 million. David Robertson, $10 million. Brandon Nimmo, $20 million, excuse me. Kodai Senga, $15 million. Edwin Diaz, $20 million. Omar Narvaez, that happened earlier today at the time of recording, $8 million. Traded for Brooks Raley, $4.5 million. Signed Daniel Vogelbach. I also believe that happened either earlier today or earlier this week, $1.5 million. And all of that was just this offseason. That's a lot of annual money to be handing out just this year. Now let's look at last year, what the Mets did last offseason, because I think that, time just goes so fast, we tend to not think about this, but I really wanted to take a deep dive into how much the Mets spent last year as well, and it shocked me how much money the Mets spent last year and then did the same thing this year. Check this out. Max Scherzer, $43 million. Eduardo Escobar, $10 million. Trevor May, $8 million. James McCann, $10 million. Again, this is all annually. Francisco Lindor, $34 million. Starling Marte, $19 million. It's actually 19.5, but I'm being nice and I'm rounding down. Mark Canha, $11 million. Again, it's actually 11.5, but I'm being nice and I'm rounding down. All the players that I just mentioned right there were all either signed or traded for last year. And then obviously the list before was just this year. So this is 2 off seasons of work. If you add up all of the contracts that I just said, the annual value of all of those contracts, and by the way, those contracts, those are guys that are just still on the team. Unless, somebody like a Mark Canha or an Eduardo Escobar has left at this point, which I don't think they have. I think they are still on the team. I believe this list is just guys that are on the team right now. I'm not even including guys that they may have signed last year for a handful of millions of dollars, and they're not even on the team anymore. This is just guys that are actively on the team right now and going into 2023 that I'm counting. In just the last 2 off seasons, the New York Mets have increased their payroll by $264 million per year. Just in the last 2 seasons, they have signed $264 million worth of annual contracts. That's just per year. Now, guys like Francisco Lindor, Edwin Diaz, Justin Verlander, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, these are guys that have multi-year contracts. And for Lindor, for obviously Nimmo, for Diaz, these are guys that have 5-year contracts. So you're talking about a team that has probably spent just in the last 2 off seasons on contracts $1 billion? Maybe a little bit less than that, maybe like 800, 900 million, whatever it is, but 360 plus for, for Lindor, 100 plus million for Diaz, 160 for Nimmo, 75 for Senga, 26 for Quintana, somewhere in the 95 to 100-ish range, 96, I guess, for Verlander. I mean, you're going to get up to 800 million, probably, or $1 billion by the time you're done, counting all that money. I mean, that is insane how much money the Mets have just handed out just in the last, 400-ish days. Maybe not even, because obviously the offseason last year had to do, it was kind of delayed a little bit because of the strike, because of, or at least the play stoppage, right? So my guess is it's only been about a year since all these contracts have been handed out and all these trades have happened. And you're talking about handing out $1 billion worth of money and $264 million of annual money. $264 million, by the way, as payroll would probably be, just as total payroll for your entire team, would be top 5 or top 10 in the league just by itself. Probably top 5, honestly. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was. The Mets' payroll right now is projected to be at $353 million at the start of the 2023 season, should all of the guys on these current contracts stick around and not get traded or released or whatever the case may be. $350 million. No team has dared to go as far as the Mets have gone. Absolute anarchy. It's crazy how much money the Mets are spending. And I don't know if it's a good thing. I think we'll see. I think this is the experiment, right? This is patient zero. The Mets are patient zero. We're going to see how far this payroll is going to take them. Is it going to be wildly unfair? Or is it going to be, the same thing as it has been? Because, again, if you get bit with an injury bug, no matter how much money your payroll is, you're not going to win the World Series because your team is injured all year. And God forbid your team is injured at the end of the year, you're not going to win nothing. You're not going to win anything. So we'll see. I mean, is this going to be like rebuilding on the show with no salary cap? Is that what this is going to be? Now, listen. If you're willing to spend the money, if you have the money and you're willing to spend it, I think that's great. I really do. I wish more owners would be willing to spend money. But in baseball, it's not just ownership not being willing to spend money. It's ownership not having the money to spend at times. So, for me, I don't know if it's a good thing in baseball. Now, if it was something like this in basketball, right? And there was like no salary cap in basketball, and a team was willing to have a $500 million payroll, and and you're willing to do that, I think that's great. But in that instance, everybody else would hopefully have that opportunity as well, and some owners would just say, listen, I don't want to spend $3 billion of my own money on freaking basketball players, so I'm just going to not do that, and we're going to stink a little bit. All right, well, that's your owner's choice. But I think in baseball, a lot of times it's not just, I know oftentimes it is owners just not wanting to spend money, but oftentimes it is just owners not having the money to spend. So man, I don't know. I don't know if this is a good thing for the game of baseball. What I do know is that I don't think that this will last very long. I think that the Mets ownership is trying to give the Mets organization and their fan base something to believe in again after having a lot of really, really rough years throughout the 2000s and 1990s and 2010s as well, obviously. So I think that that's great, but I just don't see it as sustainable. I certainly don't think it's sustainable. Whether I think it's good or not, I don't think it's sustainable at all. So we'll see. We'll see how it happens. But I'm excited to see, how that team ends up kind of putting themselves together. And I think, who knows, maybe next year the Mets will go nuts again. And I'll be right back here a year from now talking about how the possible World Series champion New York Mets are spending $150 million in annual money again this offseason and just replacing the guys they lost. Who knows? Or I could be talking about how the Mets were in third place despite that giant payroll and it was a complete catastrophe. Who knows where we're going to be? But I'll say it right now, just to be absolutely definitive. Whether or not it's good for baseball, we'll see. I don't think it's absolutely at all sustainable. But if I had to lean towards one side, I would say this probably isn't that great of a thing for baseball. Moving on to the NBA, I wanted to talk about a team that I don't believe I've actually formally talked about on this channel before, and that is the Chicago Bulls. Now, why am I talking about the Chicago Bulls? Did something happen this weekend or this past week that happened with the Bulls? Did they make a big trade, big free agency signing? No, none of that. But I am getting very frustrated with the Bulls. And the reason is because for as long as I can remember, pretty much my whole life, with the exception of a couple of incredible years where they had Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, a criminally underrated player in my mind in Luol Deng, Ben Gordon, Kirk Heinrich, all these guys that, were just fantastic. Taj Gibson, Carlos Boozer, who could forget those guys, obviously. So when they, those handful of years, those 3 or 4, however many years it was, where they had those guys when they were really good and were a top 3 team in basketball for a handful of years, with those exceptions, for as long as I can remember, the Chicago Bulls have been not horrible and not good. They have been mediocre to below average. Now, anybody who knows me, anybody who knows anything about how I am in terms of my philosophy for how professional teams should operate, knows that I am really hot or really cold. I hate when a team is lukewarm. I hate it. Now, sometimes you have to be lukewarm, right? Now, if you're lukewarm with a direction of being hot, then fine. Fine by me, that's all good. But if you are just perennially lukewarm every year and nothing else happens, it drives me up a wall. And what I mean by lukewarm is when you are really hot, let's say, like the Boston Celtics right now. The Boston Celtics have pretty much gone all in at this point. They've traded draft picks. They don't have a lot of other assets that they could trade. They don't have any great young players coming up the pipeline like a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown they had a few years ago, right? Obviously, they still have them, but now they're all-stars. They have reached as much of their potential as they're going to reach at this point, as far as I can see. I mean, I don't see Tatum averaging any more than 30 points a night for the rest of his career. I mean, that's probably about where he's going to be unless he turns into a player that none of us have ever seen before. And then Jaylen Brown, he gets better every year, but as a number 2 option, I don't know how much better he could be than he is right now. 26 or 27 points a night, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, a pretty stout defender, although he does get lost at times in terms of, being a help defender or an off-ball defender, but I digress. The point is, they don't have a lot of guys coming up the pipeline like that right now. They don't have any coming up the pipeline like that right now. They have hit their window. Their window is right now. And they are hot. They are all in. They're one of the best teams in basketball. We know. All right? Golden State Warriors, obviously. Now their reign of terror, not reign of terror. It's been really fun, honestly. But their reign of being one of the top teams in basketball, with the exception of a couple of years, has been, a decade long almost at this point. 8 years-ish. So that's a actually more sustained run for a lot of teams than I've seen. With maybe the exception of the San Antonio Spurs, even the Miami Heat with LeBron, Wade, Bosh, all these guys, they only had a 4-year window. That was their window until LeBron left and then Bosh left. So it was just, they had a very short window. Some teams don't even get that much. They don't even get that much of a window. The Raptors had 1 year. One. That's all they had. And they made the best of it. They got a championship, right? But the point is, those you could see, the Raptors trading for Kawhi Leonard. They're all in. They're going for it. Or like what the Pacers are doing right now. They have traded away most of their all-stars. They now have guys on their team that are really good if you're Tyrese Halliburton, and then good like Miles Turner, good like Buddy Hield, and then you got a spattering of other really good young up-and-coming players that may be able to take the reins at some point. But you know where they're heading. They are rebuilding at the trade deadline this year, for the NBA trade deadline, which I'm looking to do something similar to what I did last year, by the way, so keep an eye out for that. At the trade deadline this year, I'm sure they're going to be shopping more. They're going to be getting rid of more of their players. They're probably going to try to trade Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, guys like that are still eating up a lot of money because they are very ice cold. They are rebuilding. They know they are not going to win a championship. They're not even pretending to try and compete for a championship. Or a team like the Detroit Pistons, who they're not competing for a championship, so they are selling their assets. They're trying to get young players. They are doing what they need to do. Unlike those teams that are either really hot or really cold, the Bulls have pretty much been the 8 seed in the playoffs, the 7 seed in the playoffs, the 10 seed, the 11 seed. They have been really right in the playoff conversation pretty much every year for as long as I can remember. And, some years are a little bit better, a little bit worse than others. A few years ago, they had the 4th pick in the draft because they were a little worse than they usually are. Or last year, they were the 4th, 5th, whatever seed in the playoffs. They were a little bit better than they usually are. Like, you have a little bit of, one standard deviation to the right or left some years. But pretty much that team has just been mediocre for years and years. They were mediocre when they had Jimmy Butler, and then they made that trade to try and be, a young rebuilding team. Now, is it the Bulls' fault that Zach LaVine turned out to be a stud? No, it's actually a really good thing because you have a guy that you might be able to build around. But the Bulls have just been for decades at this point. And it infuriates me, and I just don't understand why the Bulls won't just pull the gosh dang plug at this point. Like, last year, they acted like a team that went all in. You got DeMar DeRozan, you signed Lonzo Ball, you already have Zach LaVine, you traded for Nikola Vucevic, and yet, they still stink. They still stink. At this point, whatever the vision is of the Bulls GM and the president and the owner, it's not working. It's not working. I know this is hard to hear if you're a Bulls fan. I get it. I know. Kenny's going to be mad. I understand. But it's not working. And it hasn't worked for 20 years. Whatever plan you think you have, whatever vision you have for a championship team, it is not working. The Celtics. Look at the Celtics. Look at the Warriors. Look at teams like that. Heck, they may not be a championship team, but look at the Utah Jazz right now. They had 2 stud all-stars on their team, traded them both away, and they're about as good as they were with them than they are without them, or they're about as good without them as they were with them at this point. Because They know that to build and rebuild a team, you have to have good young players, draft picks, and guys that are willing to do what needs to be done to win a championship. You have to. The Celtics' two best players were drafted by them. And then they surrounded those guys with other key players that they needed to win a championship. And by the way, their defensive player of the year, point guard, was also drafted by them. And their stud all defensive team center, Robert Williams, who's making his debut tonight, and I'm very excited to see how that goes later on when I'm done with this. He was also drafted by the team. Grant Williams, a fantastic role player, he was drafted by the team. So you see the pattern, right? You can't just expect these free agents to come in and not have any draft capital around them to do anything with. Now, you had the 4th pick in the draft a couple years ago. What'd you do? You got Patrick Williams. No bueno, no bueno. He has not worked out even one iota for the Bulls. It does not look like he is going to be the answer for them. So, for the Bulls, it's just sad. I don't understand why you don't pull the plug. They've been trading away draft capital at this point. Trading away all that, Wendell Carter, by the way, kind of fits the bill as to what you might need if you're a rebuilding team. A nice, solid, young player to rebuild around, and now he's doing great out in Orlando. That's another team that you can at least see the vision. I mean, a few years ago, it just felt like they were kind of sitting there going, how many 7-footers can we put on the court at one time? But now, there's only a few 7-footers on the court at one time. So, they're improving, right? But all jokes aside, I just don't see where the Bulls are going right now. Now, I know injuries are playing a huge part in it. Obviously, Zach LaVine has had a lot of injury troubles. DeMar DeRozan has had his injury troubles. Lonzo Ball hasn't played in, I think, almost a year at this point with his injuries and him dealing with all of his ailments. So, and then, obviously a spattering of other injuries as well that don't help. So that plays a part in it for sure. But I think if you're going to go all in, part of having a championship roster is having guys that are reliable. And, you've got DeMar DeRozan, who's been pretty reliable health-wise over his career. But the other guys that you've surrounded him with, in Zach LaVine, in Lonzo Ball, in Nikola Vucevic, these guys have not shown that kind of consistency throughout their career in terms of staying healthy all the time. And so when you have that, it's going to be a lot more difficult to win a championship because one twisted ankle and you're toast. Your whole championship dreams go up in smoke. Now, I'm not saying that, those guys aren't helpful on a championship team. Like, you put Zach LaVine on the Warriors right now, or you put Zach LaVine on the Celtics right now, or God forbid you put him on the Bucks right now, and that would really, really, really do some damage for sure. He's a great player, but as the number one guy, and I think arguably you could say either DeRozan or LaVine is your number one guy right now, that's not going to do it. I mean, DeMar DeRozan, a fantastic player, but he proved in Toronto. If he's your number one guy, that's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be. Zach LaVine can't do it by himself. So, I just think that you should either really trade for an absolute stud and just get it rolling and try and go all in for the next couple of years and just go for it. Or, dude, sell the pack. Sell it all. Maybe keep one of those guys. If you feel like keeping Zach LaVine, keep Zach LaVine. But at this point, I think he's 28, 29? He's not getting younger. That athleticism that he's relied on over the last, 10 years is going to go away, especially with all the lower body injuries that he's had. Patrick Williams is not your solution. I think you got to rebuild through the draft. You got to if you're Chicago. And I don't think they're interested in doing that right now, and I don't understand why. I really just don't understand why, because I think unless you want to continue to get the 13th or 18th pick or whatever in the draft every year and not have a chance to get a guy that's going to alter the future of your franchise, then I just don't think that the Bulls are going to even eventually win a championship. You're just going to be stuck in purgatory. You're not in heaven, you're not in hell, you're in purgatory. You're going to be stuck there until God knows when. So, Chicago, if you can hear me, which I don't know why you would, but if you can, really think about it. Think about the fact that you have gone all in, and 2 years in a row, it's been injuries that have crippled you. Now listen, 1 year injuries crippling you, not anything to sneeze at. You can run it back next year and see what you have. But at a certain point, if those same people or those same injuries keep being a problem, you're going to have to sit back and say, I think us going all in has failed. We have to try and salvage this situation the best we can. Sell them for parts, see what we can get back, and try and figure something else out and try again in a couple of years. The Bulls are spending a crazy amount of money on their team right now. I know they're paying the luxury tax to have 10 wins, 11 wins on the season right now? The Celtics have 22. Heck, the Warriors, who everybody's saying is they're struggling so mightily. Oh no, they're awful this year. They're never going to win a championship. They have 15 wins. So, again, Chicago, if you can hear me, pull the plug. I'm sorry. I love the players you have. I do. But when Alex Caruso is your second best player, that's not good enough, man. That just isn't good enough. Pull the plug. Build through the draft. Get some top 5 picks. Build with the young guys. Do what the Rockets are doing. Do what the Spurs are doing. Do what the Pistons are doing. Just go for it, man. Be awful for more than just this year and then go, whoop, we're going to trade our draft picks for a borderline all-star and see if he can... No. You've done that 3 times already. Vucevic wasn't the answer. Upgrading. I'm not even putting it in quotes. I don't even know if it's an upgrade. From Wendell Carter to Vucevic. That didn't work. Bringing in DeMar DeRozan. That didn't work. Zach LaVine. Great player. Hasn't brought you anything. It hasn't. Sorry. Lonzo Ball. God bless him. When he's on the court, he's fantastic, but the guy can't stay on the court. Just pull the plug. Pull the plug, Chicago. I don't really see another option at this point, unless you got some magic fairy dust that you're going to sprinkle and trade for Kevin Durant or something. No. Pull the plug, Chicago. Pull the plug. Now, I was going to talk this week about something completely different. I was going to talk about what I think the Red Sox should do for the rest of free agency. And I don't really think that I've done anything like that on this channel before. And I was really, really excited about doing it. But now, I really don't even want to. Because what has happened over the last couple of days with the Red Sox has thrown me through a loop so badly that I now have decided to just be angry and tell you guys about it. That's pretty much what I'm doing. So if you're not the kind of person that wants to hear Tyler get angry, then oh well, because it's going to happen. I am so angry with the Red Sox right now. Now, it's not for the reason that a lot of other people are upset with the Red Sox right now, and that's for letting Xander Bogaerts go. Yes, that does hurt me. That is sad because I love Xander Bogaerts. He's won 2 World Series titles with us. He's been with us for a decade. I didn't want to see him go. But I said in my, my video last week, I don't think that it was a good idea to match that contract, so I think it was actually the right thing to not re-sign him if that was the contract that was on the table for him for the Padres. I think it was the smart thing to do. It would have just been a horrible contract. So that's not why I'm upset. Here's why I'm upset. A couple of days ago, might have even been yesterday, I can't even remember, it all kind of blends together at this point, the Red Sox designated for assignment, DFA'd, Jeter Downs. Now, if you know who Jeter Downs is, or I should say, if you don't know who Jeter Downs is, let me give you a rundown. No pun intended. Jeter Downs was the main prospect that the Red Sox received in the Mookie Betts trade. So we got, obviously, Alex Verdugo, who was the major league ready young player that you will probably need back in a trade like that. And then the big-time prospect that the Red Sox got was Jeter Downs, a shortstop. He was going to be the quote-unquote shortstop of the future, or he was going to be the second baseman in the future for the Red Sox. Well, he just got designated for assignment. He's not even on the roster anymore, which is hysterical because there are like 3 or 4 levels of the minor leagues. And you didn't want to put him in double A or single A or high A or any of that. He was so awful that you just let him go. Is that right, Red Sox? Okay, well, obviously the Mookie Betts trade wasn't a good one anyway. Unless Jeter Downs turned into some all-star and Alex Verdugo continued to be as good as he is, then, maybe that trade would end up looking good a couple years from now, maybe. But now that he's not even on the Red Sox anymore, that trade looks awful. And I thought that was enough. I was like, man, that bothers me. But you know what? That wasn't enough for me to completely change the way I was going to do my podcast today. What made me change was something that literally happened like 2 or 3 hours ago at the time of recording this. The Red Sox also designated for assignment Eric Hosmer. Now, Eric Hosmer, not the best player at this point anymore in his career. He was serviceable last year and had a solid year the year before, but other than that, he hasn't really done much the last few years after he got that big contract from San Diego. But you traded away your best pitching prospect to get him. Now, I don't know if you are aware, but the Red Sox pitching last year was about as effective as my best friend Kevin going out there and throwing with the hand on his right hand that has a nub on it. That's about as effective as the Red Sox pitching staff was last year. Their bullpen was awful. Their starting rotation was awful. Everything was awful. The Red Sox bullpen, no one in it had more than 8 saves. Kenley Jansen, who just signed over to the Red Sox, had 41 saves last year by himself. And if you talk to a Braves fan, they'll tell you that he had a horrible year with 41 saves. That's 5 times the amount anyone on the Red Sox had. And he had a bad year. That's how bad the Red Sox were. Seriously, I'm not making this up. So, you traded your best pitching prospect. Now, granted, Jay Groom's dealt with injuries. He's been a reliever in the minors. He's been a starter in the minors. He hasn't really lived up to that first round billing that you would have hoped for. But he's still 25 years old. He still had a shot. And he was still your number 1 pitching prospect in your organization. And you traded him away when you are in a rebuilding year to get a guy whose, contract was awful, admittedly. And I can guarantee you that that's probably why they designated him for assignment. They might bring him back on a better contract maybe, but I doubt it at this point. Not like anybody's going to claim him. So, You traded away your best pitching prospect to get a third of a season from Eric Hosmer, who's making a ton of money, and that's it in a rebuilding year when you're not making a postseason run. He's not Kyle Schwarber, and this isn't 2021. When the Red Sox traded for Kyle Schwarber at the trade deadline in 2021, that made sense because they were in first place or second place in the East at that point. They were competing for a World Series. They needed a left-handed bat. They needed a thumper at the top and at the, in the heart of their order. They needed a guy like that. And it turned out great. Now, I wish that we would have kept him because I think he led the NL in home runs last year. But, such is life. It happens, right? That made sense. Trading your best pitching prospect in a rebuilding year for 1/3 of a season of Eric Hosmer, not exactly a world-beating bat or glove at this point, and on a terrible contract in a year where you were last place in the division with the Orioles in it. What sense does that make? Even if you were to keep him on a terrible contract, I would be confused. I'd be like, why? But at least you could say, hey, I got 2 years out of Eric Hosmer. I guess that's better than a third of a year giving up your best pitching prospect. That's what's bothering me. It doesn't even seem to be a direction or any sense to any of this. Again, I don't think the Red Sox should have re-signed Xander Bogaerts for a contract that was bigger than the Padres contract. I don't. But God almighty, save me and my soul if Rafael Devers leaves. If Rafael Devers leaves, I'm just going to walk right into Shane Bloom's office and say, all right, what the hell's your plan? Because I don't even have a guess. I don't even have a guess at this point. Right now, sitting here, I don't even have a guess. But if he lets Devers walk out the door, I'm going to look at him and be like, hey, what boxes did this guy not check? Was he a terrible batter? No. Was he a terrible fielder? Not anymore. Was he old and decrepit and declining? No, he's like 25. If he leaves, God help us all. God help Red Sox Nation, because there's going to be riots in the streets. You're telling me you're going to let Mookie go. You're going to let Xander go. You're going to let Devers go, and you're going to keep... Who knows? There's no one even to keep at this point. There's no one left. JD Martinez, you're going to keep JD Martinez until he's 45? I don't know. But that's the end of the podcast here. I'm gonna put a stop to it before I end up destroying my monitor. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all so very much, and I will see you all next time. Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends, because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share it with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.